Hi there, here we are again talking about Mexico. Now we're finally going to get to modern Mexico. This screencast is since 1990, and this is part one. There will be two parts, so make sure you watch them both. They're going to be a little bit shorter, but they're going to be a little more text heavy, so a little more text, a little fewer images. All right, let's recap. Let's pull this up. And let's recap our essential questions. For the big discussion we will have at the end of the unit, these are the things we want to think about. What principles should guide the development of Mexico's economy? How should Mexico define its relationship with the United States? How should Mexico define its relationship with the rest of the world? And how should Mexicans address their country's inequality and poverty? So that's what we're looking at. We will have a big culminating activity where we discuss this and we write about this. So let's see. Quick recap. A long time ago in Mexico, there were the Maya and the Aztecs, two really cool civilizations that had a lot of cultural achievements, like the calendar and written language and the biggest pyramid in the world. Then the Spanish came over in the 1500s, colonized. Then Mexico got its independence in 1821. There was a lot of coups and instability. Remember, a coup is when a small group takes over the government and overthrows the government. Finally, in 1917, a new constitution was written. It's lasted to the present, so there's been some stability for the past 100 years. However, the whole time that this has been going on in Mexican history, there has been a division between the wealthy elites, the Catholic Church, the peasants, the indigenous people, and the middle class. So you often have competing fights between those groups. And you also have a history in Mexico of too much influence by foreign countries. The U.S. invaded in 1846 and took over half their territory. And then in the 1900s, there was a lot of foreign investment. And so ownership of natural resources like gold mines and oil wells owned by foreigners. All the profits were made by the foreigners. So that's where we are leading up to 1990. Let's check it out. In the 90s, there is growing unrest. The PIR, that's the political party in Mexico that had been in power for about 70 years. People were demanding change. One thing the PIR does, they negotiate the North America Free Trade Agreement. This is a huge turning point for Mexican-U.S. relationship. We start to be partners economically. By the way, now NAFTA, as this says over here, now NAFTA is called the USMCA. President Trump renegotiated some of the terms of NAFTA, and it's got a new name now. So what was NAFTA? Mexico basically opened up the borders between Mexico and Canada and the U.S. so that businesses could do businesses across the borders. They could sell things, they could trade things, they could build things. So it opened things up. So for Mexico, that meant that they could buy things made in the U.S. and Canada for less money. And they also could sell more to the U.S. and Canada because they had more people there, so they could sell stuff to them. It also meant that international manufacturers would move factories to Mexico. Because if you're a French company and you want to sell stuff to U.S. consumers, if it's made in Mexico, then you don't have to pay taxes when it crosses the border. Actually, you have to pay some taxes, but the taxes are much lower. So something that goes into the United States from Mexico, the French company can make a lot more money if they do it that way. So a lot of international companies put factories in northern Mexico. U.S. businesses also moved factories to northern Mexico. Why would they do that? Well, if you put the factory in Mexico, then you can pay the wage laborer $2 or $3 an hour rather than $20 an hour. So American companies could save a lot of money on labor. For a while, this was good for Mexico. They had trade surpluses to the U.S. They were selling more than they were buying. However, most of the factories in Mexico were owned by Europeans and Japanese and Americans, and they didn't use Mexican raw materials. So the Mexican economy wasn't being helped all that much because it was other companies just putting their factories in Mexico. And again, they only paid about $2 or $3 an hour at these factories. And in contrast, the U.S. pays about $23 an hour. Those numbers come from 2015. Okay, how much was traded? This shows you how much Mexico imported to the U.S., like how much they sold to the U.S., and how much they bought from the U.S. And so they had a balance. They were selling $70.9 billion more. Wait a second. Oh, this is our deficit. This is the U.S. deficit. Canada was also selling us more, so we had a $17.1 billion deficit. So the U.S. under NAFTA had deficits to both Canada and Mexico. That's in 2017. So I think that's why Trump was trying to renegotiate things. Okay, so that happens in 1994, NAFTA. There are some political reforms going on also. There's a group called the Zapatistas. Remember, 100 years before the 1990s, there was a civil war, and one of the groups was the Zapatistas. And these guys renamed themselves after that same group. They were angry over how rich people were still benefiting more from the Mexican economy than poor people were. They thought NAFTA was going to keep doing that. There's a violent revolution. This is what their army looks like, or looked like 5 years ago. But that gets put down by the government. Finally, in the year 2000, a guy named Vicente Fox is elected from an opposition party, and there's a peaceful transfer of power where his political party takes over from the PIR. This says 80 years. Actually, it's about 70 years that they held power. So today, what does Mexico face today politically? Well, there's about 120 million people, and that's a challenge, which is difficult to solve because you might be getting past carrying capacity. There's so many people that land can handle having when you have pollution and food, and you've got to take care of the people. So that's getting to be a lot of people. A lot of the people in Mexico feel that NAFTA didn't really deliver a better life to average Mexicans. Again, it helped some elites, some people. If you were already wealthy, then maybe you made a lot of money off of it. That's difficult to solve because it's challenging to renegotiate with things with the United States and Mexico. As I mentioned, the Trump administration has renegotiated something, and I don't know all the details, but it's supposedly better for everybody. There were also a lot of people demanding economic, social, and political change, so they just wanted a lot of change. And I'm saying that's difficult to solve because the historical divisions in their society were so deep. The Catholic Church, the rich landowners, the indigenous people, the middle class. There's a lot of fixing, a lot of people's interests who are sometimes competing with each other, so it's hard to please everybody. Today, economic issues. Well, first of all, Mexico's doing okay. They're not like a really poor country. When you rank the countries in terms of their wealth, Mexico is ranked 71st out of 182 countries. And there's actually 196 countries in the world. So that number 182 is just the available data. So economic challenges. With NAFTA, about 1 million farmers lost jobs. And that's difficult to solve because they're competing against U.S. farmers. And corn is one product that we made that our farmers were really good at producing, and it put a lot of Mexican corn farmers out of business. Another problem for Mexico's economy is that the oil industry is sagging, and that's difficult to solve because a lot of people in Mexico don't really want to turn to foreign investment. We don't want America or Great Britain or Saudi Arabia or anybody messing with their oil industry. Final thing is that recessions in the United States hurt Mexico. Like in 2008, there was a big recession, And our economies are so linked through exports and imports and all the factories on the Mexican northern border, that when our economy sags, they also are tied to us and their economy sags. So that's difficult to solve because we are so linked through NAFTA. Our economies are really tied together, and we are a big part of Mexico's economy. Okay, that's a wrap on part one. If you see me, if you have any questions, see me or email me.